Hello and welcome to the Property Roundup on iPropertyRadio with myself, Carol Tallon, the show where we chat to industry experts to get a view on new trends emerging. This show is brought to you in partnership with Property District, changing the narrative of the industry. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Terry Gorry of Terry Gorry and Solicitors in Enfield. Terry, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you very much.
Terry, many people will be familiar with seeing your content. You're definitely one of the most prolific content creators on social media. And I would say that across businesses in Ireland, and particularly across legal businesses, because it's not something we've generally seen from the legal profession. So you might just tell people a little bit about the practice that you run and the type of work that you do.
So the practice I run is sort of a conventional private firm business, concentrating mainly on the likes of property, employment law, litigation, personal injuries, wills. In fact, we do everything except criminal law and road traffic. We don't do either of those because it just doesn't fit, and we've enough going on. My background then is I was self-employed from the age of 23, so I've been self-employed for a long time. But I was in retailing and property investment, construction, and various other business down through the years. So I'm actually a late convert to the legal industry, legal profession, and I suppose it's that external view or perspective that I bring into the legal industry that's led to the social media exploitation, as it were, and the use of that, and perhaps a different mindset, a different perspective on generating clients. And obviously generating clients is the name of the game for any solicitor,
Very good. Actually, Terry, I wasn't aware of that, and that's a really interesting approach. But actually, in a way, it makes sense because, quarter of a century ago, I started out studying law, and back then, I remember the excitement back then was that there had just been changes made at that time that meant solicitors could now advertise their services, because actually prior to that, it wasn't even allowed that solicitors, and I'm not sure if people are aware of that solicitors weren't in a position to advertise what it was that they did.
There's still some question marks over it, and the whole question around the likes of personal injury advertising and so on. But I mean, if you consider the likes of, or the content that I put out on social media, I mean, it's arguable that none of that is actually advertising. It's simply content marketing, and it's useful content of utility, etc. But I never, at the end of a YouTube video, for example, say, dial and smile now, call me, here's the number, etc. I simply put the information out there, and people say, Jesus, this fella knows what he's talking about. I'll email him or I'll contact him or whatever, and that's it. And that's how I generate leads, how I generate clients, and how I've been doing it. But I only qualified as a solicitor in my early 40s. So prior to that, I was in retailing, and then I was in property investment, and then I was in construction, and then the property crash came in 2008, and I lost everything. I lost everything I'd made up to that point. And I had been quite successful to then, but I had a wife, 4 kids, and my back was to the wall. I was 42 or 43 years of age, and I went back to college, studied law, became an apprentice solicitor, qualified very, very quickly, and qualified in 2011. So I'm relatively new to the thing,
Yeah, and I'm sure that in some ways that can be a drawback, but quite frankly, I can only see it as a positive. And
it was a huge positive, because to be honest with you, I didn't have the time to beat around the bush and rely on referrals, go to Chamber of Commerce meetings, do the usual traditional thing that a solicitor might be advised to do or might be inclined to do. I didn't have time for that. My back was to the wall. I'd lost everything. I needed clients, and I needed them fast. And so the quickest way for me to communicate with people was by producing useful content, be it blog posts originally, and I did, prolific blogging, and then I have transitioned over to video. And video clearly is huge. So I've, 23,000 subscribers on YouTube. I've over 25,000 fans on Facebook. I've 37,000 followers on TikTok,
It's huge. The content you're putting out is prolific. And look, and you're absolutely right. It is absolutely adding value. By the way, just a distinction for people out there that actually marketing And advertising was traditionally and is supposed to add value to people. So that's actually what content marketing is, that you're not just saying, this is us, this is what we do, come talk to us. Content marketing, the whole premise behind that is that you're adding value all the time, that the people
exactly, and you're providing
providing
utility. But not only that, but you're building a relationship. And I have people contacting me from all over the country who believe that they know me, and they know me, or they think they know me from the videos. And the video is very, very powerful in that regard. It's the closest thing to me getting in front of somebody face to face. Video is the closest I can do, you know.
And look, you've touched on it there. It's about trust and transparency. And I hope you won't mind me saying this, but quite frankly, the legal profession is one that has, you know, really been a shining light for trust and transparency. And I think for that reason, there has in the past, the industry has benefited from having certain status, or certainly it did, you know, up until the property crash. It benefited from having a certain status. It was respected that there was never an expectation that trust would have to be demonstrated. It was a privilege. It was a privilege that went with the title. And I think that's something that has fundamentally changed. And I would imagine many of your peers are struggling with that. Whereas actually,
exactly, yeah, you're absolutely right. And the thing, if you look at a lot of traditional solicitors' websites, you'll see where they went to college, the degrees they obtained, and what they do and what they have done, rather than, can I fix Pavel's problem? Do you know what I mean? Or can I fix the problem with the haymaker of a row going on between two neighbours over a right of way? So if I can, you know, so it's not a question of where I've come from or what I can do. It's a question, do I understand your problem and can I help you fix it, you know?
Yeah. And look, I would imagine coming from, you know, I don't know a lot about retailing, but certainly from the property investment world and from the construction world, if you can troubleshoot a contract in construction, you can probably negotiate anything, you know, because it's not that they're exceedingly complex, it's that the margins are so slow. Everything are so low. Sorry, everything is important. So it means that people fight, and that this transference of risk, which is what a modern construction contract today is really. If you can negotiate that, you can probably negotiate anything. So yeah, I completely accept that this is a really comfortable place for you to be coming from, and I can see how that would translate into value for your clients. But look, let's talk about some of your clients. You know, I've seen some of the content that you've done giving advice to people who are thinking of buying and selling. So let's break down, and we certainly want to discuss things like the vacant property refurbishment grant, because you know that's a really hot topic for rural Ireland, particularly at the moment. But let's start with people who are thinking of selling their home. And again, you mentioned there that you're advising people not just locally, but on a wider basis. Is now a good time to be selling a home? Is this something you would be helping, that you would be encouraging people if they come to you? Or are you saying, listen, sit back?
Well, look, it's very much down to the individual circumstances of a person. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why a person might sell. I mean, they might sell and have a replacement dwelling in mind. They might be trading down. They might be trading up because their family is growing. So it would very much depend on their own circumstances. That's a decision that they have to make. But in terms of selling and getting ready to sell and so on, there's certain basic things that they need to put in place, that they really should put in place before they put the property on the market. And one thing is to basically contact the solicitor and ensure the solicitor knows what's going on, because the solicitor will have to take up the title documents from the lender. The likelihood is there's a mortgage, there's a lender, and there is a bit of a delay there. Now, you know, there's no point coming to me and telling me we're after going sale agreed, and I'm saying, congratulations, where are the title deeds? Because you're looking at probably a 3-week or 4-week turnaround. And then there's frustration all around, and there's the risk or danger of losing your purchaser. So there's some basic things, but ultimately the decision to sell will depend on your own circumstances. As I say, you have to live somewhere, but you may be trading down. You could be at the end of your career, or your family could be reared, or you could have a growing family and your job prospects may be good. You may want to move maybe closer to Dublin to enhance your career and so on, or even to pursue further education, or to let your children pursue further education in the likes of UCD or Trinity or Maynooth or wherever. So it will depend on your circumstances, you know.
Okay, so I suppose the takeaway for people who are thinking of selling there is to, at the same time that they're spring cleaning and decluttering their home, is to make sure that their title's in order.
When they're speaking to their estate agent, they should also be speaking to their solicitor, because they're going to need to get certain things in place. Taking up the title documents from the lender will take a little bit of time, especially if it's the likes of Pepper, for example, who can be slow. So that's one aspect of it. The second one would be getting your LPT, your local property tax record in order and so on. And then you might need a certificate of exemption or discharge for NPPR tax. Then we'd be asking you whether you've carried out any work on the property or not, because if you have, there may be planning permission or building regulations issues there. In other words, you may need a certificate of compliance from an architect or an engineer and so on. So there's some basic stuff that we can run through with you as a sort of a checklist, and then we're ready to go. When you get your buyer, when you go sale agreed, we can issue contracts and we can issue the relevant documentation, rather than be holding on and waiting for ages to get certificates in place and so on, you know.
Very good. And then let's talk about buyers, not necessarily home buyers or first-time buyers, like right across the board in terms of investment as well. Who are the buyers that you're talking to right now?
Most buyers would be relatively young people with relatively good jobs, strong jobs, but they are borrowing big money. There is obviously incentives available for them to help them get on the property ladder. There's the Help to Buy scheme, and there's the first time home buyers incentive scheme. And some people are availing of both of those. A lot of people are availing of the Help to Buy, certainly. And that would be the type of profile. Then obviously you have people moving up the ladder, as it were, the property ladder, and maybe trading up as their position improves and have paid down some of their initial mortgage and so on. So, but a lot of people, new people to the country, people who have come in and have good jobs, good professional jobs from outside of Ireland, would be a fairly big factor in the market, as I see it. Working in good firms, working in good companies, high tech, IT, software, stuff like that. They're buying, and they're buying in the likes of Enfield and places like that, and they're thinking sort of long term, you know.
Very good. Terry, what did you make of the news that it looks like the Help to Buy scheme is going to be made available for those self-building? Because obviously you're operating from Enfield and there's quite a large rural catchment area there. Would you deal with many self-builds?
Well, Help to Buy now is already available for self-builds. It's already available for self-builds. We would deal with a good few self-builds. Yeah, a lot of people, especially in the likes of Enfield, will be getting a site from perhaps a parent or from an uncle or an aunt or whatever. So that would be a feature as well, yeah. But I think there was some suggestion or some talk about Help to Buy being extended to the second-hand market. I'm not sure whether that's the case or not.
That's something that was floated only in the last, I'd say, week or 10 days. As is common at this time of the year, you have the pre-budget submissions and you have lobbying calls. So that's certainly something that would put forward. And while I can see how that would be of benefit to home buyers, I suppose I would question whether the supply of new homes delivery is solid enough that we can really take away what was essentially a supply side initiative.
And not only that, but I mean, it would probably have inflationary impact or pressure, you know, on the second-hand market as well. And the market is probably cooling down a little bit, or has cooled down a little bit. And there is talk about, you know, a lack of or a halting of the growth that was there, you know, but it has been fairly steady over the last while. So.
And tell me, are you seeing many investors? And by that I mean, you know, maybe I don't particularly like the term amateur investors because I don't think it's accurate to describe people who are building up a portfolio. But are you seeing many kind of one-off investors?
No, I'm seeing a lot of those investors actually selling for various reasons, but generally we'd be acting as vendor or the solicitors for the vendor rather than for the purchaser. Very, very few people are actually buying properties with a view to letting them out, you know. And clearly there's been a huge exodus of the small landlord from the market, and who could blame him or her, you know.
Yeah, and look, unfortunately, that's a trend we're seeing, whether it's in urban or rural or regional towns. That just seems to be the trend that's there. And to be fair to Sherry Fitzgerald, they've been alerting us to this since before 2016, and the problem is getting more pronounced. And again, this time of year, every year, we're promised something meaningful in the budget. And I mean, what was it one year? A washing machine appliance or something ridiculous. So I wonder, does the state understand how the importance of landlords right across the country, and I just question that sometimes. But we touched earlier on the vacant property refurbishment grant. That's another kind of important scheme. You might just talk us through the mechanisms for that and see, is it something that you've seen? Is it something that's of value to your clients? Have they been able to avail it?
It's hard. I haven't seen much of it, to be honest with you. I mean, I think the scheme only came in May 2023 or thereabouts. It deals with vacant properties and derelict properties. Vacant property, you will get a grant for 50 grand, provided you tick the boxes and are eligible and so on. And 70,000 is the grant for a derelict property. And a derelict property then is one that's structurally unsound and dangerous. The local authority is the relevant body that deals with it, and there is an application process through which you must go. Each local authority then has a person appointed, apparently, to come out and carry out inspections and so on, and ultimately then make a decision as to your application. To qualify for the vacant property grant, the property must have been built before 2008. It must have been vacant for 2 years or more. You must own it. You cannot be a company. It must be an individual. You must live in the property when it has been refurbished or make it available for renting. And then your tax affairs must be in order, and you must have paid the LPT. So it is 50 grand for a vacant property, 70 for derelict property. It covers all sorts of work. The application form is quite extensive. You will need to prove that the property is vacant, that you own the property. You'll need a quotation for the work. You'll need planning permission if it's required. And as I say, you make your application to the local authority. There is a sort of a payback or a clawback situation then. If you only live in it for less than 5 years, for example, you must repay the full grant. If you live in it for more than 5 years but less than 10, you repay 75% of the grant. And if you live in it for more than 10 years, there'll be no payback. And then the local authority will, as part of their application process, get you to sign a charge. So they'll actually have a charge on the property for whatever grant they give you to cover them for you bailing, essentially, before the 5 years or whatever, you know.
Thanks a million for going through that, Terry. I suppose one of the reasons why I was asking if you found it benefited your clients is because this is a scheme that I really welcomed at its introduction, because I live in rural Ireland. I see the level of not just vacancy, but also dereliction. And the dereliction in the rural areas are usually in beautiful rural areas where actually people would love, where people have maybe made and tried to make direct approaches. But actually, when we got into it, and it's something we've discussed on the show here a couple of times over the past few months, when you look at the operation of the scheme, it's really unworkable. So, and by that, I mean that a number of these properties, when you go to look at them, won't be mortgageable because of the condition. So therefore, actually, if you have a small amount saved in a lump sum saved in cash, you'll have to use it to buy the property outright. You mightn't be able to get a mortgage. And then how do you finance the work? Because actually all of the work in its entirety has to be carried out before you can draw down any grant. Now, actually, that's something that I've taken up with some of the local authorities directly and asked, okay, who, like, give me an example, talk me through who is actually in a position to use this scheme. And actually, when we've pushed for it, the reality is we were told that this scheme really is for people who own the property or who have inherited the property and essentially have a lump sum available to carry out the work, or if the credit union is willing to do it. And look, I think the credit unions are great, but they can't be the state's backup plan. No, because they don't think through a scheme.
Yeah, that's a fairly small subset of individuals like who would be eligible. Yeah. And so whilst the program in theory looks good, in practice, you know, I've seen a lot of criticism online, and I've seen comments on my own videos and so on Facebook or YouTube or TikTok, whatever, where, you know, there was, I think, a prime time program done about it, and apparently there's only been one successful application in the country or whatever. I'm not sure whether that's true or not, but I haven't seen much of it, quite frankly, in practice. So, you know, I know the scheme is there and I can talk about the scheme, but I haven't seen anybody coming to me about the scheme. Now, I do have some clients coming in actually from Germany and from the UK, and I think they're going to apply. They would be cash buyers. They're coming in and buying places in the likes of Cavan and Leitrim and so on, and more luck to them. They're cash buyers and they would be in a position to, but as I say, I haven't seen any successful applications coming across my desk yet, you know.
Look, it's an absolute source of frustration to us here, and you know, I think it's a frustration for home buyers who would love to live in these properties, who find them extremely desirable, who would be willing to do a huge amount of work. They're willing to get stuck in, but they physically can't front load the finance on two scores. You can't buy a property, particularly one that's not mortgageable, and you can't carry out all of the work. And I actually had one vacant homes officer say, see if you can find a contractor who was willing to do the work, subject to you getting a grant. Now, from your construction background, what do you think my chances are of finding a contractor who would do that deal?
Yeah, well, there's a contractor who's essentially going to finance your construction project. It's unlikely.
It is unlikely in the extreme, you know. And so look, these are just some of the challenges we're having. But you know, it's interesting, and it occurs to me just when you talk about comments on your social media feed. You know, we only talked about maybe the use of social media as a way for you to share your experience and help people. But actually, one of the unintended consequences, one of the unintended or benefits of social media, I find, is that it's a giant listening machine. You're getting very instant feedback in a way that it's very difficult as a small business owner to get feedback from the market, whereas actually social media will give you feedback. So it was actually social media feedback that alerted us to maybe some of the mechanics of the scheme that weren't working. But because you're communicating so regularly and you're getting instant feedback, so not just across this particular scheme, but from people thinking of buying and selling, and maybe frustrated by the whole process.
even in other areas of activity as well, and even other sort of hot button issues like Enoch Burke or whatever, you're going to have immediate feedback on TikTok, whether you like it or not. And you know what I mean? And you begin to look at things with a different perspective, and you'll say, Jesus, I never thought of that now, or whatever. Now, some of them, you know, are complete left field whack jobs, but there is genuine stuff there that, you know, you would make you think, etc. But yeah, it's a double-edged sword, quite frankly. It's very, very useful, but God, you know, you're doing a deal with the devil, and you do have to live with it and just accept it for what it is, you know.
Yeah, look, and that is a fair point, but you know what? It can be kind of, it's a microcosm of people, and you've got all sorts of people there. But let's take the value out of that, and the value is for people who are living and experiencing trying to do a property transaction in Ireland. You're getting first-hand feedback, albeit at a very frustrating point in their life, so they're probably not filtering it. They're not moderating themselves the way they might if they presented in your office and were sitting across the desk from you.
And you'll also get the feedback about the likes of the Help to Buy and the first time buyers scheme or incentive scheme and so on. So you get a lot of feedback about that, and people who are there scrimping and saving and trying to get the deposit together, like, they are at the sharp edge of things, and any nuances or any infirmities or imperfections in the thing, they have, you know, they're keyed into it.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment. What kind of feedback have you seen? Like, what have you learned? You know, it's great that you're educating, you know, a whole generation of people who are thinking of buying and selling. But what are you learning from them?
Well, I mean, certainly the likes of the Help to Buy scheme and so on is very, very useful, and most people, especially certainly buying new houses, etc., are availing of it. The other scheme, the first time buyers scheme, it's a separate organisation or whatever. That's fairly bureaucratic. But having said that, it is useful, and you know, a lot of people are going for that as well. It will depend on the individual circumstances, the taxation circumstances of the borrowers, and so on and so forth, you know. Look at with the purchasers and with my clients and so on, you're going to have a certain amount of cynicism as well, which you might have had over the last 10, 15, 20, 50 years even, about, say, estate agents or about, banks or about whatever. And, a lot of that hasn't really changed very much, so you might have a completely new generation or generations of individuals, but they're all coming to the thing with the same sort of conclusion about certain actors in the whole chain, including solicitors.
I think we're at an interesting time in history, particularly across the built environment. Certainly we've seen coming from the crash, the recovery, the stage we're at now. Back in 2018, 2019, we were looking to try speed up the delivery of new homes by giving, say, the community more information, to stop this wave of what's referred to kind of what's referred to as NIMBYism, that's not in my backyard. But essentially, part of our job, a part of my role is to engage with the community, public consultation, and engaging with the community is generally listening to the community, trying to get a sense of how things are feeling. And I remember back in, maybe 2018, there was something that we flagged a concern that there was real apathy. People just kind of didn't care about things like planning issues in their local area. And we thought that was bad. We thought that was a challenge to be overcome. Whereas now, fast forward kind of 4 or 5 years, you're into anger. And that's a different thing altogether, because there's an anger across the general public that I think policymakers, local representatives, I think everybody's struggling to really understand. And part of it, I think, comes from not listening properly. And I wonder if more of these people were on social media and were listening to this over the last number of years, they might have seen this level of anger build. They might have been aware of it coming. Whereas the situation we find ourselves in now, people are so frustrated about housing that they're looking at potentially making a political change in 12, 15 months' time, with no evidence that will solve the problem.
No, and there's a certain element of cynicism as well about the politicians and the role. On the one hand, they're calling for an accelerated house building program and so on and so forth, and on the other hand, they're leading the charge against the planning application in their area. You know what I mean? So listening to the residents and so on is all very well, but I mean, to be coming out then on the radio or wherever and pontificating about the need for more housing and opposing everything at every opportunity, there's a serious amount of cynicism there. We either need more houses or we don't, and if we do, we're going to have to take our fair share, I think, provided decent planning and so on is adhered to.
Well, then tell us, what do you think, understanding as you do the experiences of particularly the consumers, the home buyers, the home sellers, and I don't know if you act for home builders or members of the construction industry who are trying to deliver homes, but to be fair, they have their challenges as well. So from the starting point of where we are now, what could be done? Because there's the schemes and all. Housing has never been so well resourced in Ireland. It just seems to be really poorly executed. Starting from where we are now, what could the government do to make it easier for people to buy homes? Because we know that's what they want.
I think ultimately we'll have to look at the whole planning process and the question of the role of onboard planola and the extent to which development can be prevented or stymied completely or delayed to the point where it's actually not viable. I think that's a serious problem. Everybody, is perfectly entitled to have their view about planning and building and so on in their area, etc. But for the greater good, we must accept, I think, that a certain amount of development is required. And, why not in my area? Why not in my back garden? And I think from the perspective of the country, as compared with, say, the UK, in terms of Ireland is full and so on, we're not nearly full compared to, for example, the UK in terms of density of population and so on. So I think the planning system could be looked at, and especially the delays and the ease with which people can simply go to the High Court or wherever and overturn decisions or challenge decisions, which ultimately delay the delivery of houses, you know.
Well, then finally, before we finish up, Terry, you might just give us some insight into what's happening in your local area based on kind of the home buyers and home sellers who are coming into you at the moment. We know there have been a number of new home schemes completed only in the last year in Enfield. There's more due to be completed. It's an area that's seen quite a lot of development as home builders have moved kind of out of the commuter belt a little.
Yeah, there's a good bit of development going on in Enfield at the moment, and has happened over the last number of years. There's still a bit of land there. I think we have the sewerage facilities and so on. I think Meath County Council have put those in place. Planning is granted, and I think there is a good bit of planning granted. So it is a question just of delivery now. And I do know that the development is ongoing, and Enfield is growing fairly quickly, and there's a good bit of development going on here. So compared to other places, I'd say we're probably better fixed in terms of delivery of new houses, certainly than most places, you know.
Very good. And look, final question for today, Terry, just because my heart is broken trying to convince business owners that there is merit to being on TikTok, and they still think of TikTok as a place where teenagers go to dance. Tell me, share your experience. I'm not even talking about the wider social media spectrum. TikTok alone, how useful has that been to you in your business in the last year?
It's been very useful, and I get an awful lot of queries, and a lot of the queries will come by email, and they will say, I'm following you on TikTok for ages, or I'm a big fan of your TikToks or whatever, or I saw your TikTok about the row concerning a will or probate or whatever. And it's as simple as that. I mean, you put the stuff out there. As I say, I have 37,000 fans on TikTok, or followers, whatever you call them. And the figures on TikTok alone, for example, for viewing of videos is remarkable. Quite frankly, it's remarkable. So people, I don't care if other business owners, especially solicitors, don't do it. Don't whip out their phone. Keep it in their pocket. I'm happy enough, you know.
I've no doubt. And finally, Terry, have you ever had to dance?
No, not yet. No. If you see me dancing, Carol, you know the game is up. I'm finished.
You and me both, Terry. You and me both.
Absolutely.
Don't worry.
Absolutely.
So, thank you so much. That was Terry Gorry of Terry Gorry Co Solicitors, based in Enfield. And that's all we've time for today. My thanks to producer Katie Tallon and to the Hear Me Roar production team. And also huge thanks to our show sponsor, Property District, changing the narrative of the industry. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out all of the other global real estate and construction shows on iPropertyRadio. And thank you indeed for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Property Roundup here on iPropertyRadio.